So I somewhat recently finished Hunter x Hunter, and in all honesty, it took me way too long to get around to watching this show, and I completely regret that decision because holy crap! If this isn't one of the best shonens I've ever watched, then I don't know what is. Hunter x Hunter follows the story of one Gon Freaks as he sets out on a journey to search for his father Jing, who also happens to be a hunter. Along the way, he meets up with and makes friends with the likes of Killua Zoldyck, Leorio Parademite, and Kurapika Kurta, each with their own goals and aspirations, but all willing to work together when possible. And Gon's pursuit of his father leads him into some of the most dangerous situations in the world, like battling against the Phantom Troop, or diving headlong into territory overrun by man-eating chimera ants. One of the things that really sets Hunter x Hunter apart is just how well it's written. The story contains complex themes, well-structured characters, an intricate power system that works to prevent power creep, and conflicts that present a much more nuanced take on the nature of man. It's very intriguing and wildly exciting, with a world that is so much greater than you would ever expect. So let's start here. One of the things that sets Hunter x Hunter apart so far is the fact that the protagonists, Gon and Killua, aren't prone to pulling out last-minute victories in the ways that some other shonen protagonists are. Sure, they do have their wins that are very close calls at times, but they aren't the type to just pull out a totally undeserved victory just by tenacity alone, the way someone like Naruto or Ichigo would. The way Hunter x Hunter handles its protagonist is by far the best of just about all the shonens I've watched. Gon has several fateful encounters that he doesn't win because he lacks the skill. It shows him as a gifted Nen user, but doesn't use that as an excuse to serve him victories that he shouldn't be able to achieve just because the plot demands he survives. Like when they enter the Heaven's Arena arc and find themselves struggling against other Nen users. They don't just magically win on the first try because the plot demands it. You actually see them struggle with their losses, with being in over their heads, and with utter defeat. It lends credibility to the sense of mortality and limitedness that the characters have. It gives you the feeling that a fight really can go in any direction in this series. Example, when Gon first fights Hisoka at the end of the Heaven's Arena arc, Gon manages to get a hit in, but Hisoka pretty much toys with the kid for the rest of the match. It isn't at all a fair fight, and the author does a good job of making it one that Gon loses without his life being at stake. And in the cases where an amateur does get the better of a professional Nen user, it's usually under very special circumstances, in their unique encounters. And of course, it doesn't just stop there, there are plenty of deaths and defeats in this series. Once you reach the Chimera Ant arc, there's no telling who could be next. It does a good job at making sure you know that just because you're familiar with a character does not mean that they are guaranteed to survive, like many shonen series will. It's a brutal world full of brutal elements that makes for a great deal of trial by fire. Plus, with the story being occupied by so many interesting characters, there's plenty to find cool or enjoyable, each possessing a unique power and showing a fair bit of depth to their development. Gon is your stereotypical kind-hearted blockhead shonen protagonist, but when his mentor and friend is killed during a mission, he flies into a rage and becomes someone so different you'd hardly recognize him as the same character if it weren't for his design. He's very simple, but passionate, and very much so. Killua is a member of a famous family of assassins, but he doesn't carry the same mentality as the rest of his family members. He is logical and calculating, but he's still a good friend and ultimately a kid at heart. He's prone to his own hijinks, but he's always kind enough to look out for the best interests of everyone in his circle. Kurapika is the edgy one focused on avenging his clan that was slaughtered by the Phantom Troop, and he'll go to any lengths to make that happen. Of course, that will lead him down a very dark path and threaten to turn him into the same kind of villain he seeks revenge against. But he still has friends around him that are willing to pull him back from that ledge. And let's not forget him creating one of the coldest, most savage moments in all of anime when he brought a shovel to his battle with Uvogin. Leorio wants to become a doctor to save people, since he couldn't save his friend from an illness. He has a strong sense of justice, but a little bit more sense and wit than Gon. He's a great support character whose personality rather than his powers make him important to keep around. And then you have antagonists like Hisoka, whose lust for battle is the only thing that really makes him an antagonist. He's still willing to work with people who don't like him, like Kurapika and Gon, even though he knows they'll ultimately be on opposite sides once the whole thing is over. He's driven by that singular desire to do battle with strong opponents like Chrollo and Jing. And even the Phantom Troop have their close brotherhood and stand out as good antagonists, as they're pretty downright evil, but have a very close bond with each other. Add on top of this the fact that every single one of these characters has their own unique power, and it gets really interesting. And of course that brings us to one of the coolest power systems I've ever seen implemented in a series. Nen. It has the same basis as just about any other spiritual power in a shonen series, but how it's applied in this one really goes a step beyond when it comes to details. For example, there are 6 types of different Nen users with their own unique properties and advantages. Enhancers are pretty straightforward, you could probably guess what that one is. Conjurers create objects, manipulators control things, emitters fire off ranged attacks, transmuters change the nature of their Nen, and specialists are a catch-all category for something that doesn't fall into any of those previous 5. And from there, mixing and matching the different types leads to all sorts of wild and unimaginably powerful abilities. Plus, you have the basic principles of Nen that allow one to control and manipulate it at will, and with just that information alone, you can create some truly intriguing fighting styles. But there's even more to it that makes it effective. Nen abilities are based on risk and reward, a trade-off, so to speak. For example, Kurapika is able to significantly increase the power of his ability by limiting who he can target with it to only certain people under the penalty of death. These pacts end up being a founding principle for how Nen works throughout the series, and can be applied to so many various circumstances that it makes things very interesting when it comes to fights. Even a weak and mundane ability can become incredibly powerful if combined with the right factors. The point is, the well-established rules and stipulations with Nen lend the series to being much more prone to strategizing and planning, rather than just being a powerhouse slugfest where the strongest and most determined person wins. A Nen user has to be smart in order to know how to use their abilities to their fullest, and that leads to the series more often than not having fights that are about strategy and tactics. Of course, this isn't always the case, like with Meruem vs Netero, which really did boil down to just raw power. But in situations like Moral vs Chitu, it really was strategy and tactics that won that battle. The Nen system allows the world to have wildly unique powers that are used in creative ways. Like Hisoka, who possesses the abilities Bungee Gum and Texture Surprise, which allow him to create sticky and stretchy Nen bands, as well as change the appearance of objects he touches. Killua creates lightning with his Nen, and even develops a cooler and more interesting version of Ultra Instinct with that. And that's just the beginning of the different abilities in the story. The possibilities are so endless that it makes for a very fun power system that can be used to fabricate just about any power you can think of. I'd say it was a stroke of genius to create something like this, and to use it this way in a story. But really, when it comes to Hunter x Hunter, the best part of it all is its storytelling. An aspect that is particularly notable during the Chimera Ant arc. This part of the story brings with it a commentary on the nature of mankind, as it presents the threat of the Chimera Ants as a world-ending matter that could very well spell the doom of humanity. It positions them as violent, self-serving monsters who see humanity as cattle, but over time you continue to find more and more human elements making up their characters. Pito has strong loyalty and desires only to serve the king. Poof seeks his own ends to some extent and becomes a traitorous and scheming character. Yuppie takes up an honorable warrior mentality who ends up sparing certain characters based solely on his word. Meruem's fascination with Komugi ultimately makes him a much more understandable character too. All of it adds nuance to a story that otherwise would have been marked off as just another monster extermination plot. Truth be told, because of how it was handled, it was a really thoughtful analysis of the world, presenting the ants as monsters only to show that both sides of the conflict were equally sinful in their own unique ways, the use of atomic weapons and the very act of war itself being one of mankind's greatest sins. If you ask me, the Chimera Ant arc is one of the best pieces of storytelling in Shonen, and visually speaking, the series does not disappoint. It's not like I would dare put it up there with the top quality of the stuff we're seeing this year and the last year, but its combat animation game makes it very fun and a visually thrilling experience. Fights are still dynamic and exciting. They keep a good pace and a decent amount of motion to them in order to really keep you invested, especially since the show is about 150 episodes long. With good action, cool powers, great characters, and epic storytelling, Hunter x Hunter deserves a solid 9.5 out of 10. It does drag its feet at times, which makes some episodes feel like they could have been eliminated, but I never really got the feeling that I was directly dealing with filler, so it's not all that bad. It does a good job of presenting a mature story while keeping it in the shonen vein. It also got me hooked on one of the best anime intros I have ever listened to. Seriously, Departure is like a top 5 anime opening for me. This series really does deserve the GOATed title. If you're like I was a month ago, I'd recommend you stop what you're doing right now and go watch Hunter x Hunter. But that's about all out of me. Thanks for your time. If you liked this video, consider hitting those magic like and subscribe buttons, as those simple but free actions do really help me. And if you have any thoughts of your own to add, go ahead and do so down in the comments. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Later.